Well, I'm originally from a small town in northeast Nebraska called Wayne, population in those days 4,200. But it was a college town, which made it kind of interesting, state college. My parents were both lawyers in the town, small town lawyers. They went to Creighton University Law School together. That's where they met. I have a sister who's 14 years younger than me. She's also a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer, my uncle was a lawyer, and it was the last thing I ever wanted to be was a lawyer. But no offense to lawyers out there. So I guess it was when I got into high school, maybe a sophomore in high school, that I entertained the idea of becoming a priest. And but I was first interested in the Christian religion, knowing more about it, and then comparing denominations and monasticism. I was interested in monasticism, monks. So at a certain point I had to decide where I wanted to go to college. And my parents allowed me to go to St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, which is run by Benedictine monks. And the reason I went there was because I wanted to study theology, and that's what I majored in. And nobody I knew had ever gone to St. John's, but so I was the first one in our town, I think, to do so, probably the last also. Well, after I graduated from college, I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to be a priest, or if I did, what religious order I should join. I considered briefly the Benedictines, I considered briefly the Jesuits, but I had a roommate in college who I was very close to, who I got along well with, who had joined the Dominicans. He was a year ahead of me, and he seemed to be very happy with them, so I paid him a visit. He was in the formation community. At that time, it was in Dubuque, Iowa. And I liked what I saw. It was partly monastic, and they had emphasis on academics. And one thing led to another, so I joined the order. That was 1977. My novitiate was in Denver. Then I studied philosophy, a little bit of theology in Dubuque, Iowa. And then our studium moved down the Mississippi to St. Louis. And that's where I finished up and was ordained in 1983. And within about, I think it was 9 months, I found myself standing in West Africa. And that at the time was one of the missions, as we called them in those days, of the Dominican province that I joined. And we also had another mission in Bolivia. And I had actually been to Bolivia as a seminarian, but I felt more attracted to what was going on in Nigeria. So I ended up staying in Nigeria 18 glorious years, and they were really wonderful years for me, and I really took to the Nigerian people and liked them very much. And Nigeria is still very much a part of me. I have WhatsApp messages going and coming every day with old friends and new friends in Nigeria. During that time, I held a number of different jobs. I started out as parochial vicar, and then after about 7 years I became pastor, and then eventually I was the prior of our community there, and the last 4 years I was prior provincial, which is the major superior. And during my time as pastor, it was really a grace period. I was able to head up the efforts to build a new church, and it was a huge church built by an Italian company. And the people paid for it 100%. No money had to be brought in from the outside. In fact, we had money left over, so we started building a 27-bedroom, 5-story priory, which is now, I think, completely occupied in Nigeria. So that building of the church and building of the priory was really a grace period for me, because it brought me so much closer to the people, and I saw what at times really heroic sacrifices they were willing to make for the sake of their church, and made some lifelong friends in the process, and was edified by their own commitment. So. Yeah, it was very large. We had 25,000 people coming to Mass every Sunday. Now the church had been taken over from the Archdiocese of Lagos in I think 1951 or so. So it didn't start with me, certainly. It had been around for a long time. But it had become, so to speak, a very popular parish in Lagos. And we had 5 masses. Saturday vigil masses were not allowed. I'm not sure if they are allowed even now. And about half the people would receive communion. And but even so, we had 25,000 people coming, and it was just so exciting to be there. And they sang with great gusto, and we had 6 different choirs and wonderful organist, very lively music. And then daily masses were in the hundreds too, at 6:15 in the morning and 6:30 in the evening, and everything seemed to be nicely reversed from patterns that we have here in the United States. For example, there were more young people there than old people. I think there were perhaps slightly more young men there than young women. Just very different. And the Africans, of course, we're talking about many, many different ethnic groups, but they don't make the distinction or the split between the profane and the secular. They see everything as kind of a continuum, and they see God's presence everywhere. And they're always ready to pray at the drop of a hat. They're not self-conscious about that like many of us would be. And they cannot separate God from reality. God is in everything, and He really is sustaining everything in existence. But they see it more acutely than we do. So it was a great privilege, working there. It really bolstered my faith. Well, the children in Nigeria were so special, and I'm not the only one who has said so. I've read articles in newspapers about it, how foreign correspondents go into villages in West Africa, and the children just stand out as very special, and they're more self-confident, I think, than children here, and they lap up attention from adults because in their own family they're somewhat seen but not heard. So I remember the very first Sunday I was there, little children started lining up to get a blessing from me. And there was one cute little girl, I think she was the smallest of them, that was standing off to the side. And she waited until everybody else had come up to me to get their blessing. And then she presented herself, and she said, in a whisper, she said, "Father," she smiled, and I realized she didn't have any teeth up here. Her baby teeth had fallen out. So she said, "Father, pray for me that my teeth will grow back." And I don't know, that story just kind of epitomizes, how charming the children were there. And I think, the most fascinating country, and perhaps the most beautiful country I lived in, not surprisingly, was Italy. Italy has everything. I don't have a drop of Italian blood, so I'm being objective, but they have the food, they have the climate, they have the sights, they have the ruins, they have everything. And to live in Rome was such a rich experience. That doesn't even do it justice to say it. But that was by far the most fascinating experience I had. Yes, well, in Nigeria, I tried to pick up some Yoruba. That was the local language. But the city was very cosmopolitan, with people from every tribe. And the real lingua franca in Lagos was Pidgin English, broken English. And that really is a language in itself. They could speak it, go deep, and I wouldn't know what they were saying. It's also a language that you can have a lot of fun with. And I learned enough of it that I could use it at times and somewhat startle people, who wouldn't expect a white man would be able to communicate in that language. I also knew a little bit of Yoruba. I took lessons in Yoruba. But Yoruba is a tonal language. And even when I attempted to pronounce it, sometimes Yoruba speakers didn't even know I was trying to speak their language because I didn't hit the right tone. And it really wasn't necessary, except when it came to old people, to know Yoruba, because they all spoke Pidgin English. I know some Italian, having lived in Rome and studied at a university there. I've forgotten a little bit too, but some of it you'll just never forget. I lived in an Italian community, as I said, so I speak a little bit of Italian. Well, when I got to Rome, I didn't quite know what I was going to study. Actually, I considered canon law, but then I opted for spirituality. And my very first day at the Angelicum, the Dominican University there, first day, first class in the morning, was on St. Catherine of Siena, and it was in English with an Irish sister professor. And she was very good, and I had tried to read St. Catherine's dialogue years before, and it didn't really interest me. I read maybe 5, 6, 7 pages and put it down. But I always kind of felt like I wanted to go back to it, look at it again. I was sure that I was missing something. So that course forced me to read most of the dialogue in order to complete a project. And after being forced to read most of her dialogue, I got a little bit interested, but I always say it wasn't love at first sight. And then that summer I studied Italian in Siena, and the priory that I was living in had a library, and there was an excellent biography of St. Catherine written in English that was in that library. And so I read it, and then I was hooked. I was really hooked, and I thought, wow, I think I have enough interest. Now I could write my licentiate thesis on that. That's like an MA thesis. And then I read some other books that summer when I wasn't studying Italian. And by the end of the summer, I thought, yeah, definitely, I have enough interest to do this. So I wrote my licentiate thesis on her. But when I finished the exercise, even though I got a good score on it, I could see how deficient it really was. And so I requested permission to continue on and do a doctorate. And so I can finish the doctorate in an additional 2 years, making 4 years total. And I thought, to myself, what's it going to be like to spend like 2 years of my life locked in my room studying one person? I'm sure I'm going to get bored, and then what happens? Or maybe one day I'll turn a page, I'm reading something that St. Catherine wrote, and it's embarrassing, But those things never happened. The more I knew about her, the more I read about her, the more impressed I was. And she became a living person to me, just like St. Paul can be a living person to you when you read his letters in the New Testament. And she's a very fascinating person, and she demonstrates the truth of that Dominican axiom from St. Thomas Aquinas, that grace builds on nature and it takes away nothing of value, but it brings out all that is true and beautiful. So I wrote my dissertation. Eventually it was published here in the States by Paulus Press. And since then I've put together some other books, translated, edited, or both, some other books on St. Catherine of Siena. And as a result of teaching spirituality, Catholic spirituality, for a number of years at Kenrick Glennon Seminary in St. Louis, I wrote a little introduction to Catholic spirituality, which is just 100 pages long. But I make a lot of references in there to St. Catherine of Siena. Well, she was very practical. Unlike other great mystics, Teresa of Avila, for example, who wrote to her fellow co-religious, she wrote for other nuns. St. Catherine wrote for everyone. She wasn't a nun. She was like a member of a third order. She didn't marry. So she wrote for everybody, and her teachings tend to be very practical. And when I was reading along in the dialogue, ever so often I would come across what I came to call a nugget of gold. Wow, that's good, Rest of it was kind of boring, but this is really good, So that kept me going until I finished the book. And then her letters, which are about 4 times longer than the dialogue, there are 381 letters. They're not letters like you and I would write. They're more like sermons. And they're fascinating, and there are a lot of lines there that are very memorable and quotable. And in fact, I have a website that I've maintained for about 13 years called drawnbylove.com, where I've compiled a lot of these quotes, about 4 pages of quotes, and introductions to St. Catherine, if you want to, and biographies even I have there. So anybody who's interested in her can check that out, drawnbylove.com. Well, when I was living in St. Louis, I met a Benedictine monk from St. Meinrad's Arch Abbey named Brother Zachary Wilberding. And he's a wonderful human being. And he had been working in jail ministry or prison ministry for a number of years, and he used to tell me stories about it. And essentially it was work that was for him very satisfying, and that got me thinking, if I ever have a chance to work with detainees or prisoners, I think I'd like to take it. So it took me about 3 years to get into Cook County Jail in Chicago, where I was living before coming here. And I would go down on my day off, which is Thursdays, and I would sit at tables in open rooms. This was not a cell situation. I didn't have to go from cell to cell, but these guys were in bunk beds in large rooms. First place I went into, I think there were 175 in one room. On the other side of the room, there are another 175 inmates. And so I would sit down. Sometimes I'd bring Bibles or even just novels with me so that they could, come take them, share them with others. And so guys would come, talk to me. I'd introduce myself. I'd ask them what their names are. And eventually they would sit down. And then I'm always always interested, I think, in other people. So I would ask them, what brought you here, and this, that, and the other thing. And I met a lot of wonderful people, there, and had a lot of good laughs and some teary eyes too. And one thing I'd say, when you hear somebody's life story, when he tells you that from the moment he was born, he was put into one foster home after another, you're just amazed that the person seems to be as good as he is, given the circumstances surrounding his birth. And at the Cook County Jail, I think when I started going there were 8,000 inmates, detainees they're called. When I left, there were about 5,000. But I found it very, very rewarding work, and never ever felt unsafe. There was one inmate I met my first or second year at the Cook County Jail who was not a churchgoer. He wasn't religious. He probably was 25 or so. He already had children, lived with his girlfriend, I think, in Rockford. And for some reason, he just enjoyed talking with me. And when he would see me in the room, he would come over and we'd have a rather long one-on-one discussion. And one day, he cautiously, it seemed to me, asked if I would write him a character reference letter. And this is after knowing him for about 6 weeks. And I thought to myself, well, this is going to be a worthless exercise. I met this guy in jail. I've only known him for like 1 hour every week. But sure, I'll be happy to do that. And I told myself, well, if I do this, it has to be absolutely honest. So that evening, when I was back home in my parish, I got out letterhead stationery and I wrote a "To Whom It May Concern" letter. And I said, this young man has come and talked to me every week that I've been here. And I see something good in him. That's about all I said. Sincerely yours, Father Tom McDermott. The next week, I was almost afraid to give him that letter because it said so little. Anyway, I gave him the letter. He didn't open it. He said he would open it later. And following week, I went there, and he didn't immediately come and see me. And I thought, well, he's mad because I didn't say much in the letter. But then he did find me, and this is what he said. He said, "That letter you wrote," I said, "Man, that letter you wrote, I get up in the middle of the night and I read it." I said, "You do?" He said, "Yeah. You said you saw something good in me. Nobody has ever said that about me before." I was floored, and I think that was my most outstanding experience there at the Cook County Jail. But there were many. Well, I have two hobbies. I like to read, and I like to read history. I just finished a book on Churchill, and I like to read, at this point in my life, Western memoirs of pioneers in the Old West. And this is something I can read before I go to bed at night, and I don't have to remember anything. I don't have to jump up and find a pen and note something down for some project or homily or something. But I got interested in beekeeping when I was in Nigeria. We had an older priest there who learned how to do beekeeping, and he was able to build a hive according to specifications from, I think, the United Nations for what do you do when you're living in a kind of a poor area and you can't buy specialized equipment. So he did what's called top bar beekeeping. So when I got back to the States in 2005, I got interested in that and got the equipment and started doing it. I put the hives on top of our school in River Forest, Illinois, where I was pastor until I came here, and never told anybody about it. And some years were very good years. I get a lot of honey, and there were more years that were pretty lean years. In fact, for the last 2 years in a row, I didn't get anything. And so I brought all my beekeeping equipment down here to West Lafayette, and it's in a shed, and I plan in the next few days to start taking things out in case there's a swarm anywhere, and I could put the swarm of bees in the hive and see what happens. It's getting late for the season, but so my best hope would be a swarm for this year. So yeah, I enjoy it. It's some people have said that when you're a beekeeper, you're totally focused on what you're doing, and that takes your mind off cares and concerns, and I think there's something to that. Well, it's about 9 months ago, my superior, called Prior Provincial, asked me at a social gathering what I thought about coming here to St. Thomas. And my initial reaction was intimidation. But my second reaction was curiosity and attraction, because this place has a very good reputation among us Dominicans as being a place that's really on top of the game, its game, attracts vocations, and that the work is very rewarding and satisfying. So I thought, yeah, I could use that, So the more I thought about it, the more I thought it might work and that I'd be happy doing it. And so I said yes, to him. I said yes immediately, actually. But then later I wondered what I had gotten myself into. But I was 8 years in my previous assignment, a parish in, as I said earlier, River Forest, Illinois. And it was working mostly with older people. We had families in the school, but they weren't very good about coming to parish activities, including the Mass. But here I am, and beginning has been a bit daunting when I see all the activities here. But now we have 4 priests here, including myself, and so I'm not in this alone, and we have an excellent staff of 10 or more people. So it's just a matter, the more I comprehend, what the task is ahead of me here, the better I feel. So I'm up for the challenge, I guess I could say. Yeah, it's a very odd and strange time. We're making plans for when the students come back, but who knows? The governor of Indiana could get on TV this afternoon and cancel all our plans, in effect. So it's just a very hard time, to begin. And it was a hard time for me to end, my last assignment up in the Chicago area. Wasn't able to say goodbye to too many people, just kind of left. So, but anyway, we're all in it together. So I think that makes it a little bit easier. Well, my initial goal is to maintain the great work that's going on here, and so that nothing, slides backwards. And the more I get to know, the place here and what's happening in the ministry, then I would like to see, I will see, where the challenges are, and what things I might be able to improve given my own experiences and talents, and just take it from there.